the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I am still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, the retired but not really retired. Every time I talk to him, I feel like he's doing more things. Jimmy Hyams of Full Disclosure Productions is here. Jimmy, good evening, sir. How are you?
Chase, I'm doing great. And you're right. I thought I was going to retire, and I'm actually doing more things in retirement than I thought I would. I'm not doing nearly as much as I did when I was full time, but I am still doing a number of things. But the key is I'm not doing anything I don't enjoy doing.
Hey, that's the dream, right? To stay busy, but also to actually enjoy what you're doing. Anything new that you've picked up over the winter months? Is there anything new with Jimmy Hyams that you're up to in retirement?
Well, just the most recent thing we've been doing, I've had these long form interviews on podcasts on Full Disclosure Pro, which you can also find on the Rewind on YouTube. And our most recent interview was with Bob Kessling, who's retiring in a few months as the voice of the Vols. I'm going to interview Trevor Bain, a race car driver, actually on Thursday. And then I've got an interview set up next week with Mr. Jim Haslam to talk about General Neyland. So I've enjoyed that. I've probably done 16 interviews so far, and that's been a lot of fun.
Wow, that's a big week, Jimmy. This is a big week.
It is. And I like interviewing people. I really do. And every time I do it, Chase, when I do research on them, I find out something that I didn't know. And sometimes it comes from a teammate, a friend, a spouse, a coach, but somebody's telling me something about them I didn't know, and I really love springing it on them.
I love it.
Man, you've done your research, haven't you? And I didn't think he meant it as a compliment.
But hey, that's good. I love it, Jimmy. With some Tennessee basketball stuff, I wanted to pick your brain on, and then a little football here tonight, Jimmy. But I mean, obviously, you being here local too, you know the temperature in the room right now for Tennessee men's hoops at the moment. But does it feel like the dam is breaking a little bit with these back-to-back losses, and Florida coming to town on Saturday and kind of listening to how Rick Barnes talked about the team and the situation after the game? Does it feel kind of like we're at this dam breakage point?
Yeah, a little bit. And I got to admit, the more I watch this team, the more flaws I seem to see. This is a team that they had a horrible night shooting the three against Kentucky. And not only that, they had a horrible night defending the three. Kentucky shot 50% from three-point range. They were 12 out of 24 against what was supposed to be the best three-point defense in the country. Tennessee, on the other hand, made 11 out of 45 threes, which is horrible. And somebody said, well, Kentucky only made one more three. That's true. But Tennessee, think of all the empty possessions Tennessee had by missing all those three-pointers. And not only that, they started against Auburn 0 for 11 on three-pointers in the first half. They started against Florida 0 for 14 on three-pointers. Chase, I thought this would be a much better shooting team. Now, Rick Barnes said after that game against Kentucky, I believe that we have good shooters. However, when you miss that many threes, I do wonder about it. I did see this stat too, which I think is interesting. Going to the Kentucky game, in SEC games only, the four Tennessee players who had taken the most shot attempts, all were shooting less than 40%. The four Kentucky players who had taken the most shots, all were shooting 45% or better. That's a huge difference.
This is something that I've struggled with. I wonder if you feel the same, Jimmy, but it's something I think Rick can be right in terms of, I do think Tennessee has some good shooters. I don't think Zakai is a good shooter. I think Zakai is a clutch shooter, though. Like, I do still trust Zakai in big moments, and he's just, you let him, like, it's just, you let him take those threes, like, to get his shots up. Like, you live with Zakai doing that. Like, he's not going to go 1 for 10, 1 for 11 very often. But I do think Jordan Gainey is a really good shooter. I do think he's a really good pick and pop shooter. I think, obviously, Chaz Lanier is a really good shooter. I think Igor Milicic, when he has the confidence, is a good shooter, as you saw in that game Tuesday night. I think Darlington Dubar is a good shooter when he has the confidence to fill it up too. The problem, I think, and this is something that like I'm a big NBA guy, Jimmy, and the Houston Rockets, something it's kind of stuck with me, dated like over the years with Barnes, is that look, James Harden, people got into James Harden because he didn't play defense, right? Like he was this high volume scorer. He was the most efficient player in basketball, MVP. They had the number one offense with Mike D'Antoni for years, but people were looking at it as like, well, yeah, you're never going to win a title though if the defense doesn't come along with this number one offense. Like it has a point where there's just diminishing returns when you go that heavy into offense. And part of it was like, look, you can't ask James Harden to have a usage rate in the mid to high 30s and also be an all NBA defender. It's too hard. Basketball is different than baseball and football and everything where you're playing both ways. And it's just a lot more wear and tear on the body. When you are the number one Ken Palm defense coming into Tuesday, I think naturally these guys' legs and focus is on defense. They know they're going to get pulled if they're missing assignments, if they're struggling defensively. It's a short leash there. There's not a short leash on getting shots up. It's one of those like, yeah, if you have open looks and we do stuff for you, like that's fine. Keep taking those shots. To Barnes' credit, he's like, we are okay with them taking those shots. We think we're a good shooting team. The problem is when you're so defense focused, I think it wears guys out. And I think there's just a point where you have good shooters that are not focused on shooting. That is the secondary part of them being on the court. The first part is being an all-world defense and being the best of the best of Virginia's with Tony Bennett over the years. And that's kind of like what they have to be to survive right now. I think you can win a lot of games like that, but I also do think it comes at a cost. Just the same when you ask James Harden to be the heart and soul of your offense in his prime years, you can't ask him to be a great defender. He can't do both. Like it's not feasible. So if you're asking these guys to all be just A+ defenders, like that's where their head's going to be at because they want to play and they want to make sure that they're winning games. I just don't think it's possible to be the number one offense in the way that number one defense that Tennessee plays and also be an elite shooting team. Like the reason Dalton Knecht was able to still be a high usage, high octane guy is he struggled on defense and was so good on offense that Barnes kind of like let it go where it was like, all right, he's going to get blown by a lot, but he's also just a flamethrower on offense. So we'll let it go. The difference this year, Chaz Lanier's not that guy. Chaz has got to get the ball. Like he's not dribbling up. He's not ISOing. He doesn't have the size and is comfortable as contact with Knecht. So I just think there are real limitations as to what they can be. And these guys are it seems like they're all very timid. They're all like just kind of frazzled and just uncertain of themselves on that end because the focus is still like the defense is working. Like outside of that game against Kentucky, you're the number one defense coming into that game for a reason. So I don't know. Does that all make sense? Because that's just kind of where I'm at this point.
It does make some sense. And I also think back to, do you know what Jordan Gainey shot from 3-point range his freshman year at USC Upstate?
It was in the 40s, right?
49%.
Yeah.
And last year he was in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
This year he's better. I haven't figured it out after this most recent game against Kentucky. He's about 35%, which on this team is the second best behind Lanier. And you're right about Lanier versus Knecht. Knecht could take it to the basket. He was 6'6". He had good hops on him, and he was a finisher. Lanier is not. Lanier is a two-level scorer. He has a decent mid-range game, and he can hit threes. He is not that good taking to the basket. They need him to be, but he's not. So, yeah, I do think there's more focus on defense with Rick Barnes players. Here's what you want, in my opinion, as far as your ability to make a Final Four or to win a national championship. You want an offense that's in the top 25 in efficiency, and you want a defense in the top 25 in efficiency. If your defense is number one in efficiency and your offense is 60 in efficiency, you're not going to win it. You're not going to make the Final Four. And that has been a formula for some of Rick Barnes' teams. Last year, they were more evenly balanced with offense and defensive efficiency. I don't know what the offensive efficiency is right now, but it can't be very good. It just can't be. And watching what they have done in some recent games. I mean, Auburn was just a slugfest. Against Kentucky, you missed 35 threes. I mean, and by the way, Tennessee, the most threes Tennessee had taken in an SEC game was 27 this year, before they jacked up 44 against Kentucky. So, and I will say this, while Barnes contends that he has got good shooters on the team, and I can see where individually might say that, he also said, my team is not good enough shooting the ball to put up 45 threes.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't be doing that, and they did. Now, and he also said the only time he felt like they forced any was toward the very end of the game. So most of them were a decent look. But my goodness, they have had so many games this year where they were horrific shooting threes, and most of the time that'll catch up to you.
I think so. And I don't want to be pessimistic here, but I just think they're so thin. They don't have Dubar got a little bit more run, which is positive. And you talk about guys and what they were shooting before they came here. Like Dubar was a 40% shooter both years at Hofstra the last 2 years. Yeah. These guys all have talent shooting the basketball. And I think Gainey, obviously in year 2, has made a big leap. Got to cut down the turnover stuff, but I still trust Gainey as a shooter. Like I think Gainey is a reliable shooter on this team. But I do think one of the differences between this year's team and last year, I mean, we looked at it like how uncomfortable it was at times for guys around Connect to figure out what their role was on offense. I think Santiago Vescovi was never comfortable. I think Josiah, he struggled with the comfortability just because, I mean, he just was a high usage guy. We haven't seen somebody like Dalton Connect at Tennessee. And these guys were all just very move the ball, kind of more of what we saw this year, where it was a collection of good players, not necessarily any like 10-year NBA guys like Connect's probably going to be. It's just a different type of deal. But when you have a lot of lineups where teams are playing off Jemai Mashak, and he's not a confident shooter from deep, obviously. Felix Akpara is not stretching it out at all like Jonas Adu did a year ago. And I think Felix Akpara has been really good in SEC play, but that's not his game. Like he's not going to be popping threes.
And they knew that when they got him too.
Right.
Yeah.
But Igor, the thing I love, like Igor, and we talked about this on the Monday night show with Ryan Shumpert and everybody, was like, he's just kind of in that Olivier Kamwa zone, I think, for Tennessee, where he's going to disappear for 3 games. He's a talented guy, clearly a very talented guy, but then he's going to have a game like Kamwa did against Duke, where he goes off and saves you. Like, Igor is going to have those nights. Like last night, Tuesday night, he shot the ball really well. Like, yeah. Igor can shoot. Igor can rebound the ball really well. Igor can be this kind of Swiss Army knife when he's confident, when he's active. And it's just, I don't think you're going to get consistency from Igor. I don't think you're going to get consistency from Chaz Lanier in road SEC games. I think it's going to be a problem. I don't think you're going to see him suddenly start going to the free throw line and shoot 6 to 8 free throws a game like Connect was doing a year ago. That's not his game. Like, he's going to have to come off pin downs. He's going to have to get comfortable in the mid range, coming off some screens, but that's just kind of his game. But I am concerned that how thin it is and how much they've been rattled in some of these games, where you're like, oh, when the defense isn't coming together, like they just kind of panic, and it's an older team that's panicking. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of, like, going back to what I said about the roles here. DeBar, I thought, would benefit from Cam Carr leaving in terms of, like, he would have a defined 10 to 12 minutes now. There's no uncertainty of, like, playing the young talented guy over the 5-year transfer. But that hasn't been the case. Like, DeBar has not been able to really settle in either. And I think that's been a miss on Barnes, because I think you have to live with some of this stuff when the offense isn't flowing. It's like, let DeBar figure this stuff out on the fly. The offense, it can't get any worse. And you've got to give up some defense to let some of these guys gain confidence, because I think you need the shooting. And DeBar is one of your 3 best shooters.
Yeah, you need the shooting. As we talked about earlier, you can't just win on defense alone.
Yeah.
And now one thing that's interesting to me, for the most part, Tennessee had shot the ball pretty well at home.
Mm-hmm.
They were awful on the road at Auburn. They were awful on the road against Florida, but they had bounced back against, for example, Mississippi State, Georgia, and shot the ball pretty well. Lanier has not shot the ball well on the road. He has at home. But in this case, Tennessee shot it really poorly at home against Kentucky. By the way, Kentucky's defense, 81st in the nation in defensive efficiency under Ken Palm.
Yeah.
They're not a very good defensive team. Also, Kentucky was without 2 key players, one a starter, one that came off the bench and played a lot, and they were still able to beat Tennessee. And if you say, well, teams always shoot better at home, well, then how come Kentucky shot 50% from 3 and 50% from the field at Tennessee? So it's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that also concerns you about Tennessee, and you know this because you follow it. Ziegler goes out with 2 fouls against Vanderbilt, right?
Mm.
How did they look the next 8 minutes?
They made 1 field goal.
They had Vanderbilt had an 11-0 run and a 14-2 run.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, and they looked discombobulated, like they didn't know what they were doing. So when he gets in foul, and when he got hurt at the end of the first half against Kentucky, I thought, well, that's it. Yeah, he came back and played. So, but yeah, they seem like a rudderless ship without him, and it's become apparent to me that Gainey is not real good at the point. He needs to be a 2 guard, and Boswell is just not ready. So Ziegler's got to carry the load for this team, and it seems like he can play 38 minutes a game without it really affecting him. Can we say this in March about him? I don't know, but he's been a warrior. I've been very impressed with him.
Yeah, but he has to shoot better. Like if he's shooting a career worse from deep. I think he's down. He's at like 28% now after last night. I mean, it's rough. He's got to shoot better. Like that's just part of it. But I don't know. He's not ever going to be a great shooter, but it's also like he's not going to take any mid-range. He's either around the basket where he's able to get guys on his back and he's able to meander inside and get a couple of those. Thing with Ziegler, and I love Ziegler, and this is like nitpicking because he's the least of Tennessee's problems. It's like he needs to fall more. He's one of those guys where they're on him and everything looks worse. When they hit Ziegler, they're on his back, whatever, because he's such a pest to keep up with that Tennessee would be in the bonus and he would be going to the line all the time because he's I think your best free throw shooter too. I think Ziegler should lean into that more, especially when he's inside. Just fall, man. Like I wish Ziegler was more of a flopper than he is, because I think Tennessee really needs that late in games because they play a lot of flopping teams. I mean, Auburn was flopping all over the place, and Ziegler is one of those guys that it's not in him, but man, he is so good from the line and so good at getting defenders in uncomfortable spots that he could be shooting 8 to 10 free throws a game with the way he plays.
Well, and to the point about his shooting, there's nobody on Tennessee's team I'd rather have at the foul line the last 2 minutes shooting free throws. Mm-hmm. He is the most clutch free throw shooter they got. I thought he was a year ago also. Mm-hmm. That's the guy you want at the line. Oh, he may miss one in the first half when there's 12 minutes left. But when you get into when it matters, he just comes through. And that's what I like about him so much. And he's pretty fearless. He'll go in. Now, sometimes he'll go in among the trees and try to score. And sometimes he does. Or he'll kick it out. Or he'll just dribble through it, as you said, meander, and then come out on the other side and then start again. But, Chase, one thing that bothers me a little bit about this offense, have you noticed how many times they get down to less than 5 seconds? They got to jack one up?
Yeah. They're standing around. Good. They don't know what to do. They're not doing anything.
No, that's not good. And Dalton Connett could bail them out.
Mm-hmm.
There's somebody on this team right now that can just bail them out, throw it to him with 5 seconds left and say, go get a basket. They don't have anybody like that.
Well, and the other part of it, too, is like it's not Chaz's fault per se, but Chaz, you brought him, like, it's not fair to compare him to Dalton Connect. They're completely different players. But there is not, like, he brought it up a little bit, and I wonder if that continues in this game. He brought it up more than I've seen Chaz Lanier bring it up for Tennessee. But Dalton Connect would do that a lot. Like when things were getting it, like Dalton Connect was like, I'm taking the ball up and I am going to go down and get a bucket. Mm-hmm. He has an aggressive nature. Chaz is not aggressive. Chaz is not comfortable. You talk about Gainey with the ball in his hands, kind of it gets Tennessee into trouble sometimes. Chaz Lanier does not want to bring the ball up, or Chaz Lanier is not comfortable with the physicality of SEC play in terms of dribbling and just driving, drawing fouls. Yeah. Like that is what's really, really missing, is when Tennessee's shots aren't falling. It's nothing wrong with, because I think Barnes is right that they've gotten a lot of good looks. The problem is when those aren't falling, you've got to be going to the line and drawing fouls. That goes back to what I'm saying about Sakai, where I'm like, man, you just got to start falling over and taking that beating inside, get hit, go to the line, make your two. Because I talk about this, like I'm a big Atlanta guy, and Trae Young, his 2021 season when the Hawks went to the Eastern Conference Finals, he's an undersized guard like Sakai. This league, the league changed their rules because of how Trae was baiting guys on his back at the free throw line and just going to the line all over the place, and was killing teams with it because he was able to draw these fouls, these ticky-tack calls, but it guided them to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like that, and Trae's not a great shooter. There's a lot of parallels between Trae and Sakai, and I wish Sakai would do that, because that's kind of what, it's not always going to be easy, and there are going to be nights when the shots are not falling. The problem is no one on Tennessee wants that kind of contact and to go to the line over and over again. And they had that a year ago, and they just don't. So they're going to have to live and die by either trying to get stuff up at the rim with putback dunks, or they're going to shoot some open threes because teams are going to dare them to make these threes. Yeah. Teams are going to they're okay with Sakai shooting. They're okay with Meshack shooting. They're okay with Cade Phillips, this, that, and the other. Like, they're okay with it right now.
Sure. That's what Kentucky did.
Yeah.
They were okay with it, and it worked for them. I thought this was interesting. After the game against Kentucky, Rick Barnes was asked, do you need more scoring inside out of Cade Phillips and Akpara? And he said, you can't score if you don't have the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is he saying the guards have to get it to him? Is he saying the big men are not positioning themselves and demanding the ball? Either way, his point was you can't score if you don't have the ball. Yeah. They need to be a team that can score better inside than what they are. And Akpara typically, now a couple of games recently, he's taken a pass inside and made a move and scored. But the first 90% of this season, almost all of his offensive points came on alley-oop dunks or offensive rebounds.
Mm-hmm.
But if he can develop a game where you throw it to him inside, he can score a little bit more frequently than he's doing, man, that would make a lot of difference with this team. But one of the things that catches me is that whenever Tennessee gets in one of these scoring droughts, they seem to have trouble finding somebody that can bail them out, like a Kennett could a year ago. And I think that's a missing element of this team right now.
Even Estrella too, because I think Estrella has a post game. I think Estrella would have been really nice to have inside, because I don't think that's Cade's game. I don't think it's Akpara's game. I think that was Estrella's game, and I think losing him has really, really hurt in those kind of moments when you're like, you need someone to throw it inside and just go up. And he was okay with it. Like, he has post moves. He can do stuff with it inside.
Yeah. And so, well, and that brings up this point. Tennessee doesn't have a lot of depth. I think you kind of alluded to that earlier when you talked about Dubar going off the bench. They basically go 8 deep, and every now and then one of those 8 is a no-show, doesn't play well. So Cameron Carr out of the blue transfers on December 23rd. Estrella's out for the year. And so they only entered the season with 11 on scholarship. So their depth is a bit of a concern to me. Their games, they had a game recently where they only had 4 points off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
They had a game against Georgia where they got 29 points off the bench. And that was basically Gainey and Phillips that did that. But to me, the inconsistent scoring, the inconsistent shooting of this team has me concerned about them making a long run postseason, mainly in the NCAA tournament. SEC tournament doesn't carry a whole lot of weight anymore. But it concerns me about the NCAA tournament for Tennessee. And I can almost see it right now. Tennessee holds the opponent to 40% shooting, but Tennessee shoots 30% and loses by 5 in an NCAA tournament game.
We'll see. That's why you play the games, right, Jimmy? We'll see, especially what happens on Saturday. Saturday's a buck-up game. Like, this crowd, you can't get swept this week at home. Like, you just can't. Switching gears here to football, Jimmy. I'm curious from your vantage point on this one. What do you think is more likely? Because I think this might go against what Tennessee fans are hoping for, but I think I'm curious which way you go on this. What do you think is more likely? Scoring defense gets into the top 5 nationally next season, or the offense gets back into the top 10 in scoring nationally?
Defense.
We're on the same page.
Yeah. And part of the reason is this. I think Nico Iamaleava is going to have a really good year, but a lot of that's predicated by what I think are the 2 biggest concerns on this football team: offensive line, wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't improve in those 2 areas, and it's going to be hard on the offensive line. They've only got 1 starter back, at least as of right now. One of them's appealing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see this offensive line being as good, in particular when you lose Spraggins and Cooper Mays. At wide receiver, I thought they way underachieved last year, and I don't know that Chris Brazzell will make the step that he needs to make. I don't know if Matthews is going to make the step that you would think a 5-star receiver would make. I don't know. Tennessee has not done a good job under Josh Heupel of recruiting out of high school and developing wide receivers and offensive linemen. Yeah. They've got to do better in those 2 areas. And most of the production they've had at receiver are players that they inherited or they came from the JUCO, like Brew McCoy. On the offensive line, it's the same thing. There hasn't been a consistent start on the offensive line that Josh Heupel's staff has recruited.
They might start 4 transfers in year 5 here. They're on path to start 4 transfers.
Yeah. So what's happened? I mean, they've signed some offensive linemen that were 4 stars.
Yeah.
Now, one of them's starting center at Arkansas, Addison Nichols. Yeah. But I just don't understand that. They've got to do a better job of signing and developing offensive linemen. I don't think you can hit the portal every year on your offensive line. And by the way, they haven't exactly been 100% on bringing those guys in.
Well, it's also, you look at Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia. Those aren't offensive lines built by the portal.
Right.
You can't win a national title when you build the offensive line through the portal. You can have 1 or 2. Tennessee having 4, potentially if Andre Carrick is back, like that just can't happen. Like, you can't have 4. It doesn't mean they're okay players, but you saw what Lance hurt. Like, there's a learning curve. Like, you saw at receiver, Dante Thornton, took him a year. It takes guys a little bit of time to get comfortable in this offense, in this scheme. Maybe Chris Brazzell breaks out, but I'm with you where I think it's actually a huge win that Tim Banks is back for Tennessee.
Yes.
Because I think he has been so I just underrated now by Tennessee fans that, look, there's a reason he's in play for Clemson, for Miami, for other big-time DC jobs. I think he's one of the 10 best defensive coordinators in the sport. And I think people are looking at what happened to Ohio State, who they did it to Oregon, an undefeated team, to a week later. They had a bad game there. Like, there's no question. But it's also, look, I think linebackers can be a lot better next year. I think losing Keenan Pili the last 2 years hurt them, especially in some key games, not having the veteran that they were planning on having, kind of being the captain of that defense. I think that just the middle of the field was open with tight ends in the Arkansas game, in the Georgia game, and a little bit in the Ohio State game. I think having Edwin Spillman and Arian Carter there, I think they're going to be really talented. They're going to have dudes, and they develop on that side of the ball. I think the national stuff with James Pierce is going to be really annoying this offseason, Jimmy, because I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, how are they going to replace James Pierce? I'm like, I think they're actually going to have a bigger problem replacing Omar Norman Lott, because I don't know if you've been seeing what he's been doing at the Senior Bowl. Norman Lott is a terror, and he has been really, really good in the interior for Tennessee and was important on some pass rush snaps. But replacing the interior, I like Bryson Easton a lot, but Rodney Garner is going to replace. Like, they're going to be okay with Joshua Josephs, Caleb Herring, Jordan Ross. Like, they're going to be all right. I'm going to go ahead and say Tennessee defensive line is going to be really good. They've gotten better every single season, 94th, 33rd, 22nd to 10th in scoring defense in all 4 years of Banks. I think the defense is going to have more talent than a year ago. It raises the floor so much for Tennessee where I'm like, I'm pretty dubious about where the offense is going, Jimmy, and I think there's going to be some real problems, and I think I'm not optimistic about the offense bouncing back in 2025, but I think the defense is going to be so good, and it's a defense that gave up 20 points to an offense once in the regular season last year. It was Georgia. That was it. Like, Vanderbilt had a kick return. That's how they got over 20 points. That's it. Like, that's just unheard of. Like, he is going to be a really good defensive coordinator again next year, and I think the talent's going to be really strong. Even when Jermod McCoy come back late, they're going to be really good. I think the floor is so high because of that. It kind of makes everything complicated because I'm like, this guy's not falling with Tennessee. The Tennessee's going to be really good again, but it's because I think the defense might be top 5 in scoring. Like, I think they're going to be pushing for it because I think this defense is going to be really good and they're really comfortable in the scheme, and they sign and develop and they hit the portal really well. They know what they're looking for. They know how to bring in the right guys. They know how to press the right buttons, and they've got that machine moving. The offense, I think you have so many evals that you have to hit, Jimmy, that I just think it's too much. Like, you have to hit on Mike Matthews. You have to hit on Braylon Staley. You have to hit on David Sanders. You have to hit on maybe William Satterwhite. You have to hit on Lance Hurd at left tackle. You have to hit on Peyton Lewis. You have to hit on Nico Yamayava as a Heisman type guy, because there has been 0 national championship winning quarterbacks in the last 7 years who have passed for less than 9.0 yards per attempt or more. Like, 0. Like, it can't happen. So if the deep ball is not back next year, the season, like, you can't win. If you're in 12 personnel again because your tackles can't block for the entirety of SEC play, you're not winning anything. It doesn't matter what kind of bracket you get if you make the playoff again. It doesn't matter. Like, you're not winning anything. Season, it's just not real. I feel like I'm ranting, Jimmy, but you've been around this a long time. This is where I'm at, and I need you to tell me if I'm right or wrong here.
No, the offense has to be more productive. I didn't know the stat about 9 yards per attempt, you say?
Per attempt, yeah.
Yeah, see, I didn't know that stat. I do know this stat that a year ago in 2023, and I talk more about SEC than national.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should look more at national stats. But anyway, in 2023, Tennessee's defense finished in the top 5 in the SEC in 5 major categories. It was points allowed, run defense, total yards, sacks, tackles for loss.
Mm-hmm.
They did it again for a second year in a row. Now, there's some whining about, the defense looked bad against Ohio State, and it did. They didn't play well against Georgia. Well, guess what? Ohio State's offense was horrible against Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
But Chip Kelly ended up helping them win a national championship, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
The point is, you're not going to play great every game.
Yeah.
Give me a guy that has a defense that plays really well, 11 out of 13, I'll take him.
Yeah.
Same on an offensive coordinator. In Ohio State, you saw how good they could be, but against Michigan, they stunk on offense. So that's one point. And the other thing is on the defensive line, and this is just, I understand that on offense, Tennessee tries to run a hurry up, and so they don't substitute a lot. But you can start a series with a different offensive lineman. Mm-hmm. They don't play many offensive linemen. But look at the defensive line. And one reason I'm optimistic about the defensive line, which I know you are as well, I looked at their depth chart the other day. There are 8 guys on this defensive line that I think are decent SEC players to really good SEC players. Mm-hmm. All right. Why? Because they played them and they developed them. I mean, they went like 12 deep last year.
Yeah.
And now they've lost about 4 of them, and they've got some really good guys coming back. So I think it's just the complete opposite of the way they handle the offensive line.
Yeah.
I don't completely understand it. I do get the fact that in an up-tempo, you don't want to substitute because you don't want the defense to substitute, but you can start a series with a different group of players, and they don't do that. So, but no, I'm much more bullish on Tennessee's defense entering this season than I'm the offense.
Yeah, I think it's going to be better. Secondary, Boo Carter, year older. Ricky Gibson, a year older. I think Idris Farouk, if he wins that job, I think he's an upgrade over Will Brooks. And like I said, the linebackers, I think, will be the best Tennessee's had to this point in the Tim Banks era, which I think will be key.
They need McCoy back.
Yeah.
McCoy's really good.
I love McCoy.
Yeah, that torn ACL, I don't know when he's going to be back. Some people recover quicker than others, who knows. But I thought he was just an absolute stud last year. He's an all-SEC player. Made second-team All-American in some circles. That they need him. He's really, really good, and that would help the overall defense and help the overall secondary for sure. So I think his return is imperative for this Tennessee team.
Jimmy, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Full Disclosure Productions? I know you're on the Sports Source still and Sports Source Digital Network and all that. What can the good folks check out from you this week?
Well, Paige Dower, who is my partner in this venture, we had a podcast after Tennessee's lost to Kentucky. We are launching part 2 of our interview with Bob Kessling. That will be on Thursday at 1 o'clock. Then we'll have Trevor Bain for the next week, and then Mr. Jim Haslam after that. So that's what we've been doing. I've heard some people say they're having trouble finding us sometimes on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you type in my name, all 15 or 16 interviews will pop up. You'll be able to follow them, and hopefully you'll check it out. And we've really had a good time doing this. And so we do some podcasts in and around games, and then the rewind is what I'm doing. That's talking to people about basically their past and their career. That's where you'll find the interviews that we've done.
I love it. Go subscribe today. Check them all out. Jimmy does an awesome job. You know Jimmy Hyams if you're listening to this program. You're familiar with Jimmy Hyams, and he's still doing great work each and every day. Jimmy, I appreciate the time as always, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Chase.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.